Good afternoon. Today is 25th of February, and our virtual studio is again online, on air. And I'm very pleased to present our today's guest, Dr. Philipp Fluri. Hello, Philipp, and thank you very much. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. And I'm extremely delighted to have you here, because I want to tell to our audience that your contribution to peace, dialogue, democratization of security sectors, defense sectors in many countries in the world is huge. And actually, personally, for me, I see you as my mentor, and you had great role in determining my future and professional interest. And thank you very much for that support and empowerment.
You're most welcome.
Yes. And few words about our today's guest. Dr. Philipp Fluri lectures, writes, and advises on democratic oversight of the defense and security sector, human rights, peace building, integrity, with many years of experience and with more than 40 countries where he worked with international organizations. He has his degrees, doctoral degree in anthropology and philosophy. And he was for many years one of the founder and deputy director of Geneva Center for Democratic Control of the Armed Forces. And now this organization is Geneva Center for Security Policy, for Security Governance. And thank you, Philipp, again. And today's discussion, which we organized in the framework of one of the projects of Civil Council on Defense and Security, is supported by Embassy of Netherlands in Georgia. And this is about promoting diversity, inclusion, and equal opportunities in defense and security institutions. And actually what we have done, we have somehow expanded these topics to analyze the challenges in defense sector and challenges to democratization, because without democratic processes, it would be difficult, and it's impossible to promote diversity, inclusion, equal opportunities. So that's why your expertise would be very interesting and important to analyze today's world and global challenges to security sector governance. Why I'm telling this? Because since the collapse of since the end of the Cold War and the whole direction to democratize former Soviet Union, let's say, countries to contribute to the democratic transformation of the security and defense sectors, and the huge efforts from international organizations, something has been changing for these years, for these decades. And it's very interesting to see and to have in loop. So what has been achieved during these years, almost 3 decades, and what are the global challenges for security sector governance now, and how these countries differ from each other, differ according to their security sector agenda and implementation of that agenda. Let's think and discuss the issue about the current challenges in the retrospective of these developments during last few decades. Yes, please.
Thank you, Sorena. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address your friends and acquaintances on this channel. I would like to use the opportunity to say hello to my friends in Georgia, the Caucasus, but also in the Netherlands. The Netherlands have been an important donor to DCAF and have been generous in supporting a number of very interesting programs, among others in Ukraine shortly after the so-called Revolution of Dignity. So what have been the developments of the last 30 years or so? Then obviously there was, in the early 90s, there was a great enthusiasm about the end of the Cold War and the opportunities that this new situation, perceived new situation, was meant to open. Certainly, the topic that I was working on at that time, security sector reform, security sector governance, was in the sense of democratic security sector governance, was seen as the remedy to quite a number of challenges that the transition countries, some of them the new democracies, were experiencing at the time. So what has been achieved is, on the one side, certainly, say research-wise, there has been considerable, interesting and relevant research on security sector governance. Those who were around will remember that until the very early 90s, there was no such comprehensive the integrated theory of the security sector. There was defense management, there was democracy theory, there was development, police training, but there was no integrative and comprehensive theory of the security sector and of the democratic governance of the security sector. So that was a field of research that needed to be opened, needed to be documented, and I think that is one of the achievements also for the future. We now do know very well how the security sector could be democratically organized and overseen, governed. That does not mean that all the countries which could have profited from that and which emerged from the Soviet Union did in fact profit from such opportunities. So what we have seen is, on the one hand, the emergence of certain countries from the authoritarian mindset. Others are still struggling, such as the Ukraine. Where are we going? Don't quite know. And others have succumbed to the neo-authoritarian temptation. Perhaps not the whole society, but the parts of the society that are controlling the society. So whereas at the same time, the economy has been kind of flourishing through globalization. Certainly, globalization, economic globalization, and to a certain degree, cultural globalization in the sense of media globalization, has made it or has tempted us into thinking that a better world could be created by doing nothing, or by just waiting, or by letting globalization take care of it. But as we have seen in the recent years, we have been overly optimistic. We also have been naive, and we have been willing to be misled by what used to be called the peace dividend. Well, peace, as we know from peace building, is something that needs to be built. It's not something that comes about by itself.
Absolutely.
And building peace means or implies, first and foremost, to understand who is doing what, who is being led, who is led by what values, adheres to what values, is being led by what concept of governance. And so what we have seen in the last 2-3 years, but even more so in, say, in the last year of the Trump presidency, is that we may be living in a world that is, that globalization has come to, if not an end, then its limits, and that we may be living in a world that is far less peaceful than we actually thought it was going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Philip, you fairly mentioned that we have witnessed development of some theories, concepts during these years, these decades, and today we are stick to certain concepts, and definitely security sector itself. It's not only security, as you mentioned, it's economy, culture, politics, everything is just, it's very complex. And you mentioned about neo-authoritarian regimes, or so, because what we witness is, on the one hand, bureaucracies are developing some rules, procedures in we are speaking about defense security sector, but on the other hand, the essence of and concept behind and the essence is not changing. So it's not getting more democratic, or it's not getting more responsive to needs of population, or so this is one aspect. Another aspect that in this globalized world, then the actors are numerous actors on the political agenda, social on social scene, yeah, NGOs, activists. The state is somehow weakening. What I mean, the governance. I mean, state is weaker, and in some countries there is a tendency that state needs to be strengthened, because, and I think I'm somehow connecting that to this neo-authoritarian concept, how it's emerged. So some people say that, yeah, this is somehow this setback to democratic reforms, because what we see in Georgia and Ukraine, you mentioned. So we are building democracy, but on the other hand, we are stepping back in certain areas, and Georgia is not building peace internally. So even sometimes there is a tendency to close institutions, to cut contact with civil society, or there is this challenge that it could happen. So what could be the solution to that? So what countries should do, what these numerous actors should do? So what is what your experience is telling you about this? Yeah.
Well, I think the great mistake, the illusion of the early 90s was to believe that with the end of the Cold War, all possible wars were now made impossible, because whatever the forces of light had prevailed. Another illusion was to believe that kind of concerning the human condition was, and even though it may sound naive, it needs to be repeated because and thematized and analyzed how we could be so naive to believe that in a way the belief was that everyone at heart is a Democrat and wants to be a Democrat. And not only is everyone, he or she or they, a Democrat, but they also understand how a democratic state society would need to be built. And it was the forces of evil which somehow kept them from being Democrats and building the democratic society in which they wanted to live. And as we have found out, or should have found out relatively quickly, that is not the case. A democracy, a democratic statehood, society needs to be built. And if you had like 70 years or 80 or whatever years of authoritarian rule before, it is an illusion to believe that you may go to bed on one day as a citizen of an authoritarian regime and then wake up in the morning as a Democrat in a democratic system. What is in the minds, what is in the hearts of people, what was put into the minds and hearts of people will have to be made conscious and need to be taken out of the hearts and minds of people. We should not forget the studies of, among others, Hannah Arendt of the 1950s, 60s on the authoritarian personality. An authoritarian system works not only because you have people who want to control it in an authoritarian way, but because you have a society of people who accept being controlled by these people and who somehow internalize this system. So it takes both. It takes the authoritarian and it takes the one who is controlled in an authoritarian way and accepts them. And if you accept that over generations, then many or most of the instincts that lead you towards a different system, building a different system,
absolutely.
They atrophy. And that's, I think, what has happened. It has happened in certain societies to a degree that led to a return of the authoritarians and the authoritarian system, with a belief or a general belief of large parts of the society that only authoritarianism, is the only possible form of governance for that society. So we have seen that the ideal of the authoritarian is obviously a society that does not only accept being ruled in an authoritarian way, but that has somehow internalized the authoritarian rule to a degree that makes the subjects of an authoritarian system somehow like and accept the authoritarian system. So that's the ideal form of authoritarianism from the perspective of the authoritarian. And we have that in a number of countries now. again, populations which somehow which see authoritarian rule as a positive thing that they would like even to share with others.
Mm-hmm.
So the promise, or the self-given promise, or the illusionary promise of the early 90s is coming around now, and we see that we have been terribly naive. That does not mean, that we should give up assisting societies and advising societies or representatives of societies in building democratic order, but we have to take a much longer term view for that.
So you're telling us that it's a time-consuming process. So it's kind of journey to become democratic, truly democratic states. So the problem also with all this is that pluralism, inclusion. So these are very important terms, for contemporary discourse. So what we and these discussions, actually, the role of social media is also very interesting in democratization process. What we observed for last time. So your and this technology, social media, how they change the approach towards even security sector reform, and how these instruments, let's say, could be used better for making security sector more transparent, accountable, democratic. Because what we have observed and experienced in our world, so in this, this post-Soviet, I will use this term, is that the line to democracy goes to security sector, because security sector is closing the door to democracy. So you need to start or to work hard to make changes there. And we have, because of social media, on the one hand, there is pluralism, there is a lot of information. You can use it for the sake of the democracy, transparency. But how these two things relate? So you can use social media to speak about bad behavior of policemen, or I don't know, some other things. You can bring some reality and truth, let's say, to public, or you can be one who tells stories about different deviations from democratic order. So how it's working in developed countries, in democratic countries, and how these things are related to each other. So that's very important, because as we observe, social media is very well used by politicians, by civil society activists, everyone, experts. So how it relates to the changes, to the truly genuine changes in the society. Yeah.
Well, the process of democratization, but then also the process of democracy is always, or is usually, dialectical. Dialectical means there are opposing forces or opposed forces. Not everyone wants the same in a democracy. Even in a democracy, on the road to democracy, that's even more the case. But even in a democracy, not everyone wants the same. So the process is, to a large degree, not only about building a space in which a dialectical process or a dialectical discourse can take place without leading to authoritarianism on the one hand or to anarchy on the other. But it's also about maintaining that space open over time. Now, media by themselves are neither good nor bad. They are a means of transportation. They're a means of communication. They can be a means of education as well, but only, and there can be many things, but what the success of or the use of media makes it successful, or not, is not only the sender or the attitude of the sender and the intentions of the sender, but also the attitude and the intentions of the receiver, the recipient of the information. So media can be used to transmit information, right or wrong. It can be qualified information, say about not just events, but the interpretation of events, analysis. It can be educational type of information as to how to organize democratic governance, for example. But by itself, what you will find in the media are words. What turns them into facts is the attitude and the intentions of the recipient. And so the media by themselves do not lead to change, or the only change that they may lead to is that there is more information available at a given time. But whether people actually do take the right decisions does not depend as much on the media as it does on the attitude and the ambitions of these people. So education plays an immensely important role in this dialectical process. And again, I think the fact that the media are so omnipresent and that we spend much of our time somehow as media actors and media recipients and media users has perhaps kept us from acknowledging some long-established facts, among which is one that education, that civilization is mostly organization, and organization is something that needs to be done by humans. It's not something that comes about by itself. Education is similar. Education needs to be organized. It doesn't come about by making more media and more media channels and more media data available. It is a formative process of the hearts and minds, and it cannot be replaced by media. It can be assisted, sustained by media, but it first and foremost implies a dialogue, a pedagogical dialogue, and that cannot per se be offered by the media.
Yeah, what you said, that's very, very interesting and inspiring. So absolutely, I agree with you when, they say educated society with critical thinking. These attitudes are not dependent on what media is saying. This comes from the education and from their process of socialization. Yeah. So what you're saying, so media is just transportation of this some words. Yeah. So the problem here with our societies is that we have that huge gap, that this education process, it's still, civic education, all kind of education, is still not formative. It's still in the process of formation. And this is one of the biggest challenges, I think, of our societies, where actually media became not only channeling some information, but also kind of they are in the role of educating people, and that does not work. So another problem here is also the trust towards state institutions among actors, which there is great deficit of trust in our type of societies, and how that trust can be elaborated, developed, because what we see, this is very, very important to have this peaceful political process, which is essential for developing our democracies. And as I said, what we witnessed, this is devaluation of trustful relations and trust, and first of all, towards state institutions. So what to do with that? So what could be your advice or your thoughts how to revitalize this trust in the society? Yeah.
Well, a very important aspect of trust building is that you don't deceive people, that you don't frustrate the trust of people. Mm-hmm. that you're actually being accountable, and that you are creating institutions that you document the willingness to be accountable by creating institutions that hold you and everyone else accountable to the same values, same laws, the same standardized practices, etc. So unless politicians are actually willing to do that, and thus placing the greater good of the society, the greater common good, above their personal good, unless politicians do that, they will not have the trust of all the people. They may have the trust of some of the people, those who profit from them, but not of all the people. Now, so democracy, trust, and transparency and accountability are intimately linked. And which is not to say that in democracies we may not find leaders, political leaders or business leaders who are less than transparent and who seek to escape accountability, but that is not the rule in a democracy. So the fact that you have black sheep doesn't make all sheep black. If sheep is the right kind of animal to choose for this metaphor. So the willingness to be transparent, the willingness to be accountable and to be held accountable not just accountable as some sort of a claim that you are, well, whatever I do is accountable. No, you create structures that are designed to hold you accountable, which are not beholden to you, which are independent from you. So that is what democracy is about. And as long as we do not have division of powers, as long as we do not have democratic oversight and guidance of the, well, legislative democratic oversight and guidance of the executive, as long as we don't have that, and as long as we don't hold politicians accountable to actually create such institutions, we are in some sort of a very insecure political environment, which may swing any way, anytime. It's a lesson that there's there are different lessons one can take from, say, countries which have successfully set themselves up as democracies and which have been successfully operating as democracies for some time. The lesson is not that you adopt a model, try to become Germany or the US or France or Switzerland or the Netherlands. No, you have to become yourselves, but you have to become your democratic selves. And what you can learn from democratic countries is this democratic, transparent, accountable institution building. You still have to build them in your own society, but you can see how they function and take it. So it's not about buying a model and then kind of integrating it into your own society within a few days or weeks or even years. It's about building. And building presupposes not only laws, norms, procedures, but also attitudes, ambitions to make these institutions work, which again presupposes an understanding of the value of such institutions. And if that understanding is not there, that's an educational prerogative. If that understanding is not there, you may have the best possible values. You may aspire to import the best possible institutions, and they're not going to work.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I like this, to build your democratic self. So that's very nice. I think very, very inspiring. But to build that democratic self, it's very important to have some time to reflect on anything. So I think some people would argue that in the situation when you have you are occupied, you are in constant danger from neighbor, that there is this still political actors are struggling among and between each other. There is no time for self-reflection, and there is no time left for developing our own vision. how we want to see our country and ourselves. So, and this vision or this Euro-Atlantic integration is something very general umbrella somehow, which is very helpful. Is very helpful to define yourself and to lead to certain paths. But it's clear that there is no real reflection about the strategy, vision, and so on. So that's something is lacking in this country. I mean, Georgia. So I mean, to take into consideration all those external threats and challenges, plus not enough mature democracy, which we can call transition or any other term. So, and you have already told us what are the solutions, but again, go back to solutions and to our journey to build more democratic states. What do you think is the first thing we have to do? And also, I think that this pandemic changed a lot of things in the world, and what pandemic has shown to us. What are the main challenges, resilience, and what are the problems with resilience? So what opportunities it showed us. I mean, that's also would be very important to reflect on. And I think that when pandemics will end, so I think that the world really needs to think about the results or implications or impact of this process on institutions, on societies. So that's also very important and interesting to think about. So what are your feelings and your thoughts about changes and development in times of pandemic, and the influence of pandemic on the institutions? And so, what do you think? What is do we see any changes, or will it change anything essentially in state management systems? I don't know, in the cultures itself. And can these lessons help countries like us to become more democratic, or to become more oriented on building our institutions and internal societal resilience and solidarity? So, I mean, that's could be also very interesting to have your thoughts about that.
Well, that is a lot of questions. Obviously,
yes,
more than one question.
It's not
the first question, I think, was what a country like Georgia would need to do. I mean, you cannot step out of history. Your neighbors are your neighbors. You're not going to get different neighbors anytime soon. Your countries which have expressed friendly feelings towards Georgia, you would have to see them as your friends and cultivate them. But in any case, the process is dialectical. There is always someone and something that will go into a different direction, and that will challenge the process. And also, once you have, say, the kind of democracy that you may hope for, then it still will be a dialectical process, and you will still have the neighbors which you have, and you will still have to deal with them. So So that needs to be built into the process, right? There's no ideal world. There's no way of escaping the world you're in. You may change the country, but the country may not, or the society itself may not the whole society can change the country in which it lives. It's been tried, but it's not going to work in your case. So you have to work with what you have, and that is a long history of Georgian culture. It's cultures that create resilience, or that may create resilience, or may be the source of resilience, if they are understood in a critical way. So not a naive interpretation of culture, but then they can become the source of resilience. Now, whether and I would think that or in my experience, the Georgian culture is very resilient, has proven to be very resilient in history, obviously, and it still is. It just needs to adapt to the new challenges rather than taking a backward view, taking a forward, open to the future view. Now, what can the present pandemic teach us, or perhaps asked differently, can the present pandemic be understood as a chance rather than is there something positive in it? Is it an opportunity? Well, it has certainly told us a number of things, or taught us a number of things. One of them is we may want to take a critical view as to institutions which we created or co-created above the nation state level. So the international organization I don't think has excelled in this case. The WHO has warned for years of new pandemics coming, but it has obviously not been able to tell us what type of pandemics. It has not prepared us in any way for this pandemic. Conceptually, and it has not prepared us in any way for this pandemic materially in terms of making vaccines, remedies available in time. This after the WHO went through a lengthy reform process under the previous leadership. So, what has been reformed? It's an organization that costs several $billions every year. What has been reformed, and for whom? For itself. So I'm not a public health specialist, and I'm not a WHO specialist, but what I see, and I think what everyone else can see, is we are creating institutions at the international organization level, of which we then believe that they are in charge and in control of not of the past and the present, but the future. And which then lead us to also naively believe that we don't need to do anything ourselves, and not need to prepare for eventualities. So I think one aspect of the world after COVID will be that the international organization will be under greater scrutiny. Also that nation states, or say regional organizations of nation states, will look more critically into their supply chains, medical supply chains. The question is, what does that mean for Georgia? That here and now, tonight, I'm not able to judge. But we may see greater skepticism when it comes to the internationalization and global governance, including global health governance. We may see a greater readiness of like-minded countries to cooperate on supply chains, on early warning, independent from the international organization. I'm not a prophet. I'm a simple minded security sector reform person.
Yeah. So what is true? This is more cooperation, coordination, trust, and orientation on human beings. So I think this is something very, very general, but at the same time very simple, and what is very much needed today. Thank you, Philipp. I think we had amazing this conversation here and touched a lot of very important topics, starting from challenges and authoritarianism to the importance of global governance and cooperation. And the most important thing, and what you said, is searching for global democratic self, or not Georgian democratic self, which I liked very much, this expression you have used, and to give time to ourselves for some reflection and understanding the environment we are. I absolutely agree with you that Georgian culture proved this resilience historically and in contemporary world. And I absolutely agree with you that this is our geography, and these are our neighbors, and this is the environment we have to deal with, and still to do our best to develop and to search for peace. And I think that the most important thing is to sustain these discussions, and not to close close these discussions for different ideas and different concepts to discuss, to argue, because this is something which gives impetus to developments. And thank you very much for your time. And maybe you want to say to us, to our audience, those who are listening, or give some hope, last maybe few words. So your message, let's say, to our audience and our listeners and here. So what could be your advice? I don't know, to all of us, how to build better country, let's say. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I miss Georgia. I spent certainly some of the better parts of my life in Georgia and the Caucasus. So and I think Georgia has gone through an amazing process in the last 30 years, an amazing process of regaining a personality, of regaining statehood. And it has done that, the country has done that, and the society has done that against the odds that were created by others, but also by challenges within the society. So, as we said, it takes time. You should give yourself time, or as the French say, you have to give time to time. You have to let time heal certain and take care of certain processes, but not infinite time. At the same time, you have to remain ambitious and zealous to address the obvious challenges to and within the society. And then say this process being dialectical, it would be naive to expect that that there is a blueprint somewhere for a better functioning society. As I think I stressed, is one has to build it brick by brick, creating acquis, not only in the European Union, but in the Georgian society, brick by brick, the way that a trained mason would do it, at a certain pace, and with a vision of what kind of building you're trying to build. So that takes time, but it's always good to look back on what has already been achieved and take consolation from that and encouragement. And we have talked a lot about challenges and future challenges, but we have perhaps talked too little about achievements. I think whenever we talk again, we should talk about those.
Yeah.
And be encouraged by that. And
Yes.
ask ourselves how we got there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you, Philipp, for this very interesting, inspiring, and conversation. And thank you very much for supporting Georgia for so long and being friend to us and advisor and counselor. That's we appreciate it very much, and hope to continue our discussion. And you're absolutely right. I think we have also to reflect about our achievements, and that would give us some power to continue fighting for a better future, let's say. Thank you very much.